Hey y'all, we're going to start period 5, and this is from 1844 to 1877. The period actually starts with the Mexican-American War, it goes to the Civil War, and then to Reconstruction. We're going to start by taking a look at some context of the entire period. So, the context is kind of our history of territorial expansion is significant because, just to kind of review. We have done a lot already. I know it doesn't seem like it, but we have. In 1763, right, when we were still colonies, if you remember, we made this like proclamation line, right, where the English said we shouldn't go over here because, right, this was going to be land for the Native Americans. So everything west of this proclamation line, originally, this was supposed to be for like Native Americans. Now, what is going to happen is this is going to cause a lot of tensions, right? And essentially it's going to lead to the war. And then after the war, we are going to get land. Let's see if I can change this color. All the way to here. This is our original country after the American Revolution, with the Treaty of Paris. So this is what, like 1793, right? And so this is how much land we got. And so we get access to our Ohio River Valley, which is what we wanted, right, from the French and Indian War. And so after the American Revolution, this is what we have. Now, the next major, huge thing that we are going to take a look at, right, which we talked about, is we are going to get Louisiana. Now, the thing about this is it makes it seem like we actually knew what we had. When we send people out into this area, we have no concept. We are like, I don't know, maybe it goes all the way over here. We are not really sure what it looks like. We send out Lewis and Clark, but this is in 1803, right? The Louisiana Purchase. And the thing is, there is a lot of conflict because you have Great Britain, which kind of like claims some of this. You have Spain, which is claiming some of this. We didn't really know what we got. But in 1803, we are going to get the Louisiana Purchase. Now, when we get the Louisiana Purchase, we are going to have to start negotiating. We're going to start looking at this. Where are we going to allow slavery? Well, originally, we said no slavery in this area. And then after the Louisiana Purchase, we're going to say no slavery up above here, right? One of the things about saying, we're going to look at this in a minute or two, in 1820, the Missouri Compromise, we say no slavery above this, like, except for Missouri. For slavery, we're going to start to extend slavery out. So we're going to annex Texas, right, is our next thing, which we're going to take a look at in this class. We're going to go into the Mexican-American War, and we are going to take this from Great Britain. So as we are extending, we get this from Florida in 1819, right? We get West Florida in 1819. We kind of make this border in right? And we are expanding consistently throughout this time. So we're going to take a look more at territorial expansion, but that's just kind of the broad view. So again, when we had the first Articles of Confederation, right, this is how we're going to start organizing these territories. And again, this is just context. So back to 1787, under the Articles of Confederation, we are going to basically say anything north of the Ohio River Valley, there is going to be no slavery. It's going to be federal controlled territory until it is going to become a state. So in like 1803, Ohio will become a state. In 1816, Indiana, so on, so on, so on. So when people move into these areas, it'll then become a state, and they are not allowing slavery under the Articles of Confederation in the Northwest Ordinance. So the other thing about slavery is it is in the Constitution. So we have the 3/5 Compromise, which talks about electoral votes and, which talks about the House of Representatives. And remember, this is about how many people are in the House. So weirdly, the South wanted it to equal 1 and the North wanted it to equal 0, and we come up with the 3/5 Compromise. We also have that Congress would not ban the slave trade until 1808, and we are going to ban the slave trade in 1808. And we talked about how that starts to increase the internal slave trade, But there are tensions between the free and slave states in the constitutional compromise. There is a fugitive slave law in the original Constitution. Southern states, it's a part of the Constitution that has to deal with like states' relationship to each other. If someone runs away, then the state that the slave went to is supposed to return them. And there is also like property protections as well. So when the effect of these compromises is the Fugitive Slave Clause allowed escaped slaves to be chased into the North and caught. It also resulted in illegal kidnapping. The 3/5 compromise is going to increase the South's representation. If the 3/5 compromise wasn't there, the South would not have as much political power as it did all the way through this time period. In the Electoral College, 12 of the first 16 presidential elections is a Southern slave owner. And without that political power, that may not have happened. Extending the slave trade past 1800 brought many slaves to America. And now we are going to extend the slavery into that Louisiana territory. So with the Louisiana Purchase, right, when we got that Louisiana Purchase with Thomas Jefferson in 1803, eventually Missouri is going to apply for statehood. This is in 1820. And essentially, again, we are going to have to compromise on slavery. How are we going to extend, or is slavery going to be extended? And so what happens is they're going to draw a line on what's called the 3630 parallel, above which is going to be free and below which is going to be slave, except for Missouri, which is going to be a slave state, and Maine is admitted as a free state. So here is the way that it is going to happen. So Missouri is going to be like a special status, right? Missouri is going to be slave. Above that is supposed to be free. And the real thing here is people are trying to keep a balance of power. So Missouri is slave, right? Maine is free. And we are going to keep an equal number in the Senate. This is all very confusing, but it's all about keeping balance in the Senate. Because more and more and more, the House is based on population, and more free states have more people. But in the Senate, where you have an equal number of representatives per state, they are the ones who are essentially being able to block any of these, anti-slavery ideas. So we're going to have in 1820 the Missouri Compromise, and then this is all sort of a part of Manifest Destiny, which is in 1830. This is the big kind of idea. Manifest Destiny is this widely held belief that the American people are special. This is called American Exceptionalism, and that the mission of the United States is to redeem the entirety of the continent in the image of America. America is the best, right? White Anglo-Saxon Protestants are the best, and our democracy is the best, our Christianity is the best, and it is our job to essentially spread from sea to shining sea. And not only is it our job because we are the best, but also God wants us to, right? It's kind of like people are like, look at all of these examples of how God wants us to expand west. Like Louisiana just drops out of nowhere. We're able to defeat the English. We are, right, going west. We are given all of these things. So Manifest Destiny is probably one of the biggest things to remember during this time. Last unit, we also talked about the rise of abolitionism, right? And so whereas we have been compromising with slavery, throughout time, we have compromises with slavery in the Constitution, we have the Missouri Compromise, we have all of these other compromises, we are getting more and more radical abolitionists and actually more and more radical pro-slave powers as well. But like when William Lloyd Garrison stands up in 1831, he calls the Constitution a pact with the devil, right? He is saying we need this immediate abolitionism. He's going to be causing riots. And so because you get this kind of extremism on both ends, like slavery is a positive good and slavery is an absolute sin that needs to be eradicated from the face of the earth, these folks are not going to be able to compromise the same way, say, Madison and Jefferson and Monroe are going to be able to compromise with, say, Adams, who did not have as much of a radical view of both slavery and of abolitionism. And so the American population is becoming more radical as far, or what we would call polarized, as far as their views on slavery. In the South, they are absolutely behind slavery with this idea of positive good, and in the North, they are increasingly, although it's not the most popular thing at this time, becoming radicalized around abolitionism. Manifest Destiny is helping to promote this idea of it is go west, right? Manifest Destiny is sending missionaries out west. They are sending immigrants out west. And the idea is that the nation should spread freedom throughout the continent. And so people are actually moving to places that are not part of America. So, technically, right? Technically, America essentially goes out to like somewhere around here, right? Like this is the actual US, right? This is actually a part of the Great Britain, and this is a part of Spain, right? And so people are just like going onto their wagons. They are going out to Oregon, right? And when they're going out to Oregon, they are taking with them American values, and they are basically setting up camp in Oregon, right? And this is this idea of possession is half the law, right? When American people settle into Oregon in what is this disputed territory, Great Britain claims it's theirs and the United States claims it's ours. If there is a dispute, but there are Americans who are living there, where is it going to go to Americans? We have Mormons moving to Utah when it's a part of Spain. We have Americans going into Oregon when it's a part of technically maybe Great Britain, right? We have people moving west to settle the areas, essentially to claim it as a part of America. Except for the Mormons, who kind of wanted to keep their own country a little bit. So Manifest Destiny is sort of like pushing people west. And another place that people are going is into Texas. We're going to watch a movie who's going to kind of go into this a little bit more. But Texas immigration is this idea that we're not just spreading, democracy and freedom, all that. We are also spreading slavery and these other ideas as well. But in Texas immigration, it starts off because Mexico wants to bring in immigrants to their northern territories. And so Mexico had gained independence from Spain, and Mexico now, controls these lands. And there was a lot of problems with some of the Native Americans who were attacking settlements. And so Mexico reaches out to Anglos, and they're like, hey, why don't you come in and settle? As long as you, right, become a Mexican citizen, as long as you become Catholic, and as long as you don't have slavery. Now, these are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant slave-owning Americans, and they are going to move into Mexico, but they are going to keep their Protestant religion. They are going to bring in their slaves, and they are going to not fully assimilate into the Mexican way of life. And so Austin is going to demand that Mexico remove, essentially over time what's going to happen is that Mexico is going to get upset at the Anglos who are moving in, and they're going to stop immigration. And Austin is basically going to go to Mexico and be like, hey, you have to remove this ban on immigration, and you have to make Texas a separate Mexican state. So all of this is going to start to happen. Austin is going to get thrown in jail. And we're going to have the Texas Rebellion. This is going to start with the Alamo. Remember the Alamo? And essentially, the Texas Revolution, it is going to be Anglo-Americans and Mexicans who consider themselves Texans and not Mexicans. We're like Tejanos. And they are going to join together to kick out what they saw as a controlling Mexican power. Texas is going to win, and Texas is going to be its own independent nation for a while. So meanwhile, Texas is gaining its independence. It is its own independent nation for 10 years. And it actually gains independence under Jackson, and Jackson refuses to annex Texas, even though Texas wants to, because he kind of knows it's going to cause a lot of issues. After Jackson, Van Buren is going to become president. People call him Van Ruin because this is when we have that economic crisis. After Van Ruin, right, was president, he's a Democrat. The Whigs are going to kind of get their stuff together, and they're going to get a popular American general who won in the Battle of Tippecanoe. They are going to roll out the whiskey barrels. They are going to talk about how he grew up in a log cabin. They are going to run a populist campaign. And essentially the Whigs with Harrison, who is the hero of Tippecanoe, they are going to win this election. People are upset at Martin Van Buren because of the economic crisis. And because the Whigs are able to kind of like bring out this like popular, like, you know, appeal to the people sort of like president, they are going to win. And so Harrison becomes president, but Harrison is going to die in office very quickly. I think this is the guy who I think he's the one who gives a speech, like a rousing speech in the rain, and then he dies of pneumonia. Anyway, so Harrison is going to die, and his vice president, Tyler, is going to become president. Tyler is someone that Harrison actually got because he appeals to Democrats. Tyler is not really a Whig, and so when Tyler comes into office, he does a lot of things that the Democrats would do. The Whigs hate him, and then the Democrats hate him because he's a Whig. Anyway, Tyler is a man without a party. He's kind of struggling the whole time, and that is in 1840. So while these presidents are kind of like struggling, Texas is just sitting there for 10 years. And then in the election of 1844, this is going to be the election where Manifest Destiny is essentially on the ballot. Polk, people call a dark horse candidate because he kind of comes out of nowhere. And he is going to win this election because he is going to advocate strongly for Manifest Destiny. And he doesn't just say he wants to take over Texas or that he wants to annex Texas. He says he wants to annex Texas and Oregon. Clay, who's been around for a while, is going to waffle on annexation. He's kind of going to be like, well, it's risky. I don't know if we should do it. And Clay is really known for always kind of compromising, bringing the nation together. So Clay is afraid if we start annexing these lands, we will kind of open up the country to being kind of broken apart. And really, Clay is right, because this is going to be the beginning of the breakdown of America to the Civil War. But Polk is going to win because he's strong, because he wants to, you know, he wants to expand, and he is going to win the election of 1844. Now, one of his kind of campaign promises is 54-40 or fight. And this idea of 54-40 or fight is we are going to get all of this land all the way up to, right, this is going to be our Oregon thing. If we don't get this land, right, from the 54-40 line here, right, we are going to fight Great Britain. Now, what he's going to do is actually compromise, right? He does not get this little, like, if we got what he wanted, we'd have like a little hump on our country, but we don't. What he does is he compromises with Great Britain, and he's going to gain Oregon, this part of Oregon, and we're going to have a nice, right, land. Why is he going to settle with Great Britain and not go 54-40 or fight? He's going to settle on the 49th parallel because he knows we're about to go to war with Mexico in the Mexican-American War. So he settles with Great Britain, and we gain Oregon. And Texas has already been annexed. Actually, weirdly, Tyler is the one who's going to annex Texas. And after it's annexed, we almost immediately start to have tensions with Mexico. And I think this is easier if I just kind of show you guys on a map. So when we annex Texas, the big question is, what is Texas? So when we annex Texas, this is what essentially, right, this is what Mexico said was Texas. So when we annex Texas, Mexico is like, here you go. This is Texas, right? But and it all comes down to which river you think they're talking about. Mexico thought Texas started with the I can never say Nueces River, and the United States thought it went to the Rio Grande. And so when we annex Texas, there's a big question about where Texas goes to. Now, this is called the disputed area. So essentially, Mexico does not agree that this is, right, that this area is Texas. They think this is Texas. So this is the agreed upon land. Now, what Polk is going to do is he's going to put troops right on the edge of what we say is Texas, right? Now, right, specifically though, Mexico does not acknowledge this as Texas. So he puts troops right where Mexico disagrees is our land. It's in the disputed area. He's going to put troops on there, and then Mexico is going to attack. Now, when Mexico attacks, what is going to happen is that, right, Polk is going to say, Mexico has passed the boundary of the United States, has invaded our territory, and shed American blood upon the American soil. She has proclaimed the hostilities which have commenced, and that the two nations are now at war. So, Mexico started this war, right, because she went into our boundaries. What he's not saying is she went into, right, what we don't agree on yet, right? This is a disputed territory. That is not what happens. So he puts troops in a disputed territory. Mexico attacks. We go to war with Mexico. So there is a lot of opposition to this war, kind of similar to the war with England, like the War of 1812. Whigs are going to usually oppose the war. They are more from the North. They see this as a war to extend slavery, which they are not wrong. And some people felt that the president had forced the U.S. into the war. Famously, Lincoln, I think, was the one who passed like the spot resolution, who says, "Show me the spot where American blood was spilt," meaning this was not our land, this was their land. Other people just think it's wrong to take this territory from Mexico. They see this as, imperialism. Probably the most famous example of opposition to the war is Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Civil Disobedience. And essentially what he tries to advocate for is for people to not pay their taxes so that we will not go to war with Mexico and stop this bloody massacre. Even though there is resistance, the United States is going to go to war, and they have a lot of advantages. They have a lot of artillery advantages. They have better rifles. We have the Colt revolver. We have, manufacturing that helps us to make it this way. The telegraph is going to be invented, so we have better communications. We have a strong population, all of these things. So, U.S. has 17 million people at this point. Mexico has 7. The United States has been around for a while. It is a growing economy. Mexico was just newly freed from Spain, and they are in debt, and they are struggling. Imagine if a country had invaded the United States right after our independence. We would not have been able to make it work. So the United States has huge advantages, and they are going to win this war handily. Immigrants are going to make up half of the enlisted men. Many are Irish. And a lot of Mexican actually try to appeal to these Catholics to desert during the war, but it's not that successful. Only 8.3% desert. There is 1 out of 10 Americans died, mostly due to disease and unsanitary conditions. 12,000 soldiers died during the war. So this is the Mexican-American War again, right? This is the disputed territory here. This is what we're fighting for, right? Mexico's, okay, this is Texas, this is yours. This is where Tyler's going to kind of like, set up the troops. And we are going to go even beyond all of that. We are going to invade Mexico City. We are going to go way down in Mexico. Now, we are also going to attack California at the same time. So we're attacking California. We're attacking Mexico City. This is not just about Texas. This becomes about much, much more. So when we do this, we make it all the way to Mexico. But once we do that, Mexico has no choice or Mexico City, Mexico has no choice but to surrender, right? Now, when they surrender, they are going to hand over what is called the Mexican Cession, which includes not just Texas, but all of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, half of New Mexico. So in addition to Texas, we gain all of this land as well. There is a kind of a question. We could have taken out all of Mexico, but we don't. And what we want is what we see as the uninhabited parts of Mexico. We don't want to take over Mexico City because there's a lot of people there, but what we want are these like northern territories, California, Nevada. We want to have those ports. We want to go from sea to shining sea. But Mexico had to give up almost half the size of their nation. The U.S. is going to pay them for it, but this is a huge amount of land which we gain. So as we gain this land, we are going to look at the kind of political implications of it as well. But there is this kind of concept of the border crossed us, which I think we're going to talk about for homework and for, on this idea. But I think to kind of show this, what I'm going to do is try to see if we can